Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Welcome to this DC TV series about the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is live and is about the global currency reset to retire the fake currency issued by the network of global corporate control. For nearly 2 years, we've been covering the global currency reset, thanks to DC TV, Carmen Stanley, studio producer, Maurice Jackson, audio and prompter, and Cruchet Starnes, floor director. This evening, I was given this certificate of achievement. It was a big surprise. I didn't know I was going to get it. The email telling me to get there for a public accepting of the award never arrived. That means the Fusion Center ate my email. What does it say? It says, "The staff applauds you for your determined endeavors and remarkable contributions to community media." Thank you, DCTV. Next week's show, which we are pre-recording later today, is a guide how to distinguish between fake news and real news, fake whistleblowers and real whistleblowers, fake money and real money, truth from lies. We will also talk about the alternative media next week. In 2014, one of the viewers on the Wake Up America show tweeted, "Karen is live right now. She is perhaps the most important whistleblower humanity has ever known. Please listen in." I'm embedded, together with the rest of humanity, in all of the world's assets placed in a trust at the end of World War II. Until the United States Constitution of 1789 goes back into force and effect, I vote the shares of the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. I have refused to go along with the American Bar Association in pretending that the Constitution of 1789 is in force and effect. I have said, on behalf of Americans, that we do not accept secret martial law in the United States or bogus courts. There are no shortcuts in figuring out who is telling the truth. Consistency over time is one criteria. Another criteria is whether pieces of a puzzle fit together, just like a jigsaw puzzle. Now, I've been answering your questions and comments after each of the segments on this series is uploaded. That's how people learned that I'm for real and that I work for humanity, which is united in taking back our world from the banking cartel. There's a lot of corruption from the banking cartel in the international financial system, and this comes about because of the paper money, which is also called fractional reserve fiat currency. This paper money is issued by the central banks that belong to the Bank for International Settlements. We've been calling this group the Network of Global Corporate Control because that is what 3 mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology, Vitali Glatfelder and Battiston of ETH Zurich, called them. This group even had the nerve to change legitimate governments into companies. But humanity knows right from wrong and truth from lies. We've made it clear to the banking cartel that the people in the United States do not accept secret martial law that the United States Congress was agreeing to behind our backs. The last 2 segments on DCTV were heavy sledding in preparation for the bogus inauguration in the United States. In those segments, which you can review at your leisure on YouTube, we talked about how it was the Swiss octagon ruled by the pharaonic bloodline families and descended from the Knights Templar who dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and financed Hitler. The people of the world and a coalition for the rule of law are on track to end the corruption in the international financial system by exchanging paper currencies issued by the banking cartel for local currencies and currencies minted out of the world's gold in the global debt facility. Reading people's comments after this show lets me know that they get it. Here is a comment from last week. What's the Constitution of the United States, or, and in lowercase, the Constitution of the United States? One couldn't hear how it was spelled out when it was spoken Friday, January 20th. Is it a corporation about which you speak, or is it America? What's the name of our Constitution? And what I responded on YouTube was, this is the Constitution that the banksters foisted on us. Of course, the United States is not a corporation, but the banking cartel tried to do this in secret in 1871 anyway. And I sent that on the 18th. The fact of the matter is that I'm simply passing messages to the center of the corrupt financial system and then to the people that are being ripped off and back again. I'm doing all of this as an open book. People can get and see the messages, and they can see them up and down the line. People that are calling me names are exposed as the Vatican shills that they really are. The Constitution of 1789 is going to go back into effect pursuant to Article 5. There was a lot of noise about the advisability of an Article 5 constitutional convention until I showed how Justice Anton Scalia was murdered after I accused Justice Scalia of covering up the fact that the Constitution of 1789 was not in effect, and I showed how Scalia felt that the risk of a convention was minimal. And these are the words of Anton Scalia. The founders inserted this alternative method of obtaining constitutional amendments because they knew the Congress would be unwilling to give attention to many issues that people are concerned with, particularly those involving restrictions on the federal government's own power. The founders foresaw that, and they provided the convention as a remedy. If the only way to get that convention is to take this minimal risk, then it's a reasonable one. I called out Justice Anton Scalia in a show in February. 1 week later, Justice Scalia was found dead with a pillow over his head in Texas and rushed out of that state to avoid the mandatory autopsy. I reported how I had invalidated, on behalf of the 189 ministers of finance, Christine Lagarde's agreement that she signed with the Vatican, and I also discussed the minutes of meeting of January 3, 1949, that were signed by General Eisenhower and President Harry Truman, where Jose Rizal signed over the wealth of the world into the global debt facility. In the meantime, we're on the same page. The Constitution of 1789 has been suspended and is not in effect, while those representatives in Congress are exposed as the corrupt individuals that they are. We are in interregnum. We, the people, do not accept secret martial law that the United States Congress was agreeing to behind our backs. Fake elections and fake inaugurations do not change anything. It was important to be sure that we established for the world exactly that Donald Trump and Mike Pence and the rest of the so-called federal government are mere pretenders. This was a watershed moment for us. Time will only tell if we're on track for the global currency reset. Judging by the responses of the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF and the people who continue to contact me, we are okay. Why do I say that? First of all, because the traders who've defaulted on the commercial liens that the global debt facility is holding have not tried to defend themselves. The silence of these traders, Donald Trump, Renwick Payne, that's DC's Adjutant General, Peter Newsham, that's DC's Chief of Police, Joseph Dunford Jr., that's the Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Muriel Bowser, DC's Mayor, this is damning. Not a single country has contradicted what I've been saying on behalf of the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, including the minutes of the recent annual meeting. Frank Baum's Wizard of Oz was actually all about money. The yellow brick road is gold. The United States gold was deposited for 50 years at the end of World War II in a trust called the Global Debt Facility. Why 50 years? So there would be no fighting after that time, because any claims that someone was entitled to the gold would have ended under the Roman concept of statute of limitations. And I've been tweeting about this, and it went viral. This tweet shows my correspondence with the Electoral College about the fact that the elections in the United States were fake when the Constitution of 1789 was not in effect. Donald Trump is not the legitimate president of the United States. I also tweeted Governor Mike Pence and other governors. I showed how Justice John Roberts was covering up corruption, and my letter to Roberts after the clerk of the court and Judge Merrick Garland botched my case. The inauguration was fake. Some people get confused or bored with all this detail. All you need to do is to realize that there's so much corruption, and anything that's confusing you was probably deliberately made so complicated to cover up the corruption. But you can't trust the experts, and certainly you can't trust the lawyers or accountants or journalists for that matter. I have let Germany and Japan know via the defense attachés stationed in their Washington embassies that the United States is honoring our defense treaties with these countries, and that the Federal Reserve notes are getting exchanged in the global currency reset. Stay tuned. This is likely to come to pass, but it depends on all of us and what we do. I'm also communicating with the German people via my social media and comments on the internet. And as one example, the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump is not the President of the United States. His inauguration was fake. Without the United States Constitution of 1789 in effect, the United States is in interregnum. The currency of the United States is getting replaced with currency minted from the United States monetary gold reserves and with local currency. The global currency reset was previously agreed by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and the IMF and reaffirmed at the last annual meetings. As previously agreed by the Board of Governors, any country which disagrees must register this disagreement in writing. None of the countries have done this. It's understood that many countries, including Germany, are also in interregnum, as the banking cartel has attempted illegally to replace legitimate governments with corporations. Angela Merkel is an agent of the banking cartel. The people are now replacing the paper currencies issued by the banking cartel with local currencies and with currencies minted out of their monetary gold reserves, and putting legitimate governments back into power. Many people understand this reality, including the enlisted troops in the United States Armed Forces. The treaties for the defense of Germany and Japan are going to be implemented, as I informed Germany's and Japan's defense attachés, and as I informed the Electoral College of the United States, which was not in place because the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in effect. The Federal Reserve is insolvent and is getting wound down, and unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes are being replaced with currency minted out of the United States monetary gold reserves in the Global Debt Facility administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF with local currencies. The likelihood that this happens is greater than 90%, according to a very accurate power transition model of the United States National War College. The traders in the United States are also bankrupt and are being deposed. I communicated this yesterday to General James Mattis. Many people in Germany, Japan, and the rest of the world have been keeping informed of this reality. And I've provided translations of previous articles in German on the internet. I'm guided by the power transition model that came from the National War College to the World Bank in 2004 in this. This model tells us that a coalition for the rule of law exists, which is much stronger than the network of global corporate control. I wrote about the G77, which is actually 134 developing countries, in 1975, before Ibrahim Shihada, an Egyptian lawyer who used to be the General Counsel of OPEC, became the General Counsel of the World Bank. The power transition model simulates reality and the formation of coalitions with 90 to 95% accuracy. This model predicts that the United States will replace the unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes ever since I and another former World Bank employee, Elaine Colville, got our statements up on the UK Parliament's website. The whole matrix of control of the now insolvent banking cartel is crumbling as predicted. I discussed the power transition model with then Senator Chuck Hagel in 2008. The National War College published this power transition model in a book that was edited by Tamman in 2000. I disclosed this to the House of Commons Public Administration Committee, and it's called Written Evidence for the Inquiry into Complaints. Do They Make a Difference? That was published in July 2013. And Elaine Colville also published a statement on the UK Parliament's website. My comment to Germany is Germany and Japan are the swing votes in the power transition model. Both of these countries are depending for their defense on the United States. I went to Japan in 2014 and have been working with the joint U.S.-Japan Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement to counteract the traitors in the U.S. military. The defense attaché in Tokyo emailed me in 2014. This is why Emperor Akihito is abdicating. I am now the overseer mandate trustee for the world's gold and other wealth of the world that was deposited with the 189 ministers of finance and development of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. I also vote for the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF until the U.S. Constitution of 1789 goes back into force. The U.S. Constitution was suspended after the Civil War in 1861, and the banking cartel replaced it with a secret constitution in 1781 when the Revolutionary War debts fell due. The U.S. Congress suspends the Constitution of 1789 under a state of emergency. The banking cartel likes to pretend it's entitled to the world's gold. It isn't. What makes things confusing is that the banking cartel owns the media and is trying to dominate the internet and fool people about what is real and what is fake. Donald Trump's inauguration was fake. Donald Trump is a fraud and an imposter and an agent of the banking cartel. The Coalition for the Rule of Law is not going to let Donald Trump get away with stealing the monetary gold reserves of the United States, and he is not in charge of them either. Donald Trump is simply a fraud and an imposter and nothing more. I have let Germany and Japan know via the defense attachés stationed in their Washington embassies that the U.S. is honoring our defense treaties with these countries, and that the Federal Reserve notes are getting exchanged in the global currency reset. I've let the banking cartel know that the insolvent Federal Reserve banks are getting wound down in the global debt facility. As for the lawyers, I told the American Bar Association that the legal profession has lost its standing. We've devoted many segments to the bad ethics of the legal profession, and I would like to run a clip about what I told the dean of Yale Law School. Linked to an article that just recently appeared in the Yale Alumni magazine, which I'm not going to cover the entire article, obviously, but I will read one sentence to you. It says that the current dean of Yale Law School, Robert Post, is a constitutional law scholar. And so I wanted to show you the correspondence that I've had with Dean Post, and I'll read you just a couple of short excerpts. This was a letter that I sent to him in 2007, talking about the corruption in the international financial system. It was dated the 14th of October. Per our conversation, here is some information concerning the Sarbanes-Oxley scandal at the World Bank. And what a Sarbanes-Oxley scandal is, this is what you had in Enron. This is where a lawyer is telling the board that there's corruption, and that's the statute, and that is exactly what I did. And then I sent this letter to Dean Post. And what I said in there, in 2005, the Dutch government asked the audit committee to end a campaign of retaliation against me for reporting to the executive board about an inaccurate evaluation on a failed banking sector project. So I'm not going to read from the letter. You can see that letter in the teleprompter. But what we have here is we have a constitutional scholar, Robert Post, who is not bothering to tell people what is absolutely clear cut, and that is from the Senate report that I quoted to you, which says very clearly that the U.S. Congress is declaring a state of emergency every single year and suspending the Constitution. Now, why wouldn't Dean Post tell people that everything he's saying about the Second Amendment is absolutely irrelevant, because the Second Amendment is not in force, because the Constitution of 1789 has been suspended under a state of emergency every single year since 1933. So this is open and shut, and we're living a lie. And the question really is, why is it that the legal profession thinks they can get away with this? It's mind-boggling for me, because when you read the report, it's very, very clear. And I had a similar conversation with another lawyer on this very exact topic. It's, let's see if I can find my notes here on this. This was a meeting that was held with the state legislatures at the National Conference of State Legislatures. And the reason why state legislatures are important is because the Constitution, when it is in effect, has an Article 5, which says that the people have the right, if 2/3 of the state legislatures request amendments, that there's to be a constitutional convention. And we've had more than 2/3 of the state legislatures requesting amendments. This trigger actually happened back in 1929, and the U.S. Congress has refused to call the convention, although the Constitution is clear on its face, it's mandatory. The reason that they didn't call the convention is because they already suspended the Constitution of 1789. And why is it that the American people are sitting here on their hands and not demanding for their Constitution to be in effect? Instead, what are they doing? They're accepting, like pablum, the stories that the press is running about two presidential candidates. Now, the Democrats and the Republicans are really cut from the same cloth, so long as we have this network of global corporate control, which is printing Federal Reserve notes that are unconstitutional and bribing politicians with that paper currency rather than having our regular international monetary gold reserves in our currency, which would prevent this corruption. It's really, for me, extremely disappointing that people are not recognizing the fact that the Constitution. Everybody is welcome to a front row seat in the Global Debt Facility's ongoing dialogue with the governors and adjutants general for safe conduct for the Texas Lightfoot militia. Now we're scrolling through upside down on the video prompter. Bear with me, we'll be there in a minute. And also with the American Federation of Government Employees to agree the monetary agreement and printing of Treasury dollars, to establish the Secretariat to distribute certificates for the exchange of paper currencies for national currencies, with Switzerland to obtain the uncut Treasury dollars on deposit with UBS, to see the accounts of the Global Debt Facility on Euroclear. The fact is that the real Donald Trump is not the real president. Reality is that the United States is in interregnum and its monetary gold reserves are managed by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. To stay out of World War III, we have to honor our treaty obligations to defend Japan and Germany, and that can only happen when the Federal Reserve dollar is exchanged in the global currency reset that has already been agreed, and when the United States Constitution of 1789 goes back into force and effect. Donald Trump knows this reality. It's the reality that we're all shifting into. Those preventing us from returning to our Constitution are committing treason. The United States is not going to surrender unilaterally through the weakness in the unconstitutional Federal Reserve note issued by the banking cartel that was disclosed by Vitali Glatfelder and Battiston of ETH Zurich in 2012. The Fed is already in receivership through the trust holding the United States monetary gold reserves and $2 quadrillion in debt of the Fed that General Dwight Eisenhower and President Truman established at the end of World War II. The Global Debt Facility is managed by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. I have already informed Chuck Hagel, Martin Dempsey, Joseph Dunford Jr. of this fact. Joseph Dunford's treason is in plain sight. Hagel resigned days after I discussed Dempsey's and Reimer's treason with him. I'd like to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. All of humanity is united in a coalition for the rule of law to exchange the Federal Reserve notes and other fractional reserve currencies in a global currency reset. Media is simply lying to perpetuate the corruption and to fool the unwary. Donald Trump's inauguration was simply banking cartel propaganda and nothing more. Stay tuned as the global currency reset rolls out.
upstairs, I guess, Lisa.
Okay.